Hey guys, it's Pete from MyJewelryBench.com. Today we're going to work on this particular piece. This ring is a ring that was found off the Titanic salvage about 30 years ago. And I saw this the other day on the internet and I kind of thought, well, that would be really cool to show you guys how to design this in Blender. So we're going to do that today. I'm going to try to keep this video short, but it might go a little longer than normal. So let's get started. And of course, while you're here, check out my channel. There you're going to find a whole lot of playlists and videos covering clock repair, watch repair, jewelry design, jewelry repair, and other things. 3D printing, getting ready for casting, things like that. So if you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing to my channel. And if you like this video, by the time you watch it, hit the like button because it does help my channel grow. Thanks a lot, and let's get started. So let's break that down by designing it in pieces. And the first thing we're going to do is design the ring shank. So we've got our blender set and ready, and what we're going to do is we're going to use the add-on for Jewel Craft. Now I think I have a video on how to install this. I'll put a link in the upper right corner so you can get that if you don't already have it installed. Now, first thing I need to do is add in a curve circle. So we're going to do Shift A and we're going to do curve and then a circle. I'm going to rotate this on the x-axis, our x90. And let me turn on screencast keys while I'm thinking of it. Okay, so now my screencast keys are on. So we've got our circle here. Let's go over to the items tab so we can see the dimensions here. What we want to do is increase this to about 16.5 millimeters. 16.5 by 16.5. And of course, on the z-axis, we're not going to worry about anything. Okay, so there's our ring at 16.5 millimeters. And now I can go over to the curve properties and make some adjustments to this. So here, come over here to this little mark here. This is the curve properties. I'm going to change the resolution, and I'll just make this a little bit bigger so you can see what it looks like. Okay, so we have our preview resolution. I'm going to change that to 24. I'm going to come down to geometry, and we're going to set the geometry, the extrusion. We're going to make that a little wider, so about like this. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at this number here. I'm going to try to make this particular number about 1.7 millimeters. So let me just keep going here. Not the resolution. We want this piece here, and I'll make that about 1.7 millimeters. That looks good right about there. And I need to give this some depth, so we'll give this a bevel depth. And I'm going to bring it up to about here. And if we look from the side view, that looks to be good. It's about the same. And I'm pretty happy with that particular mark. Okay, so that looks good. The only thing I have to do is taper in the edges or the sides. And to do that, I'm going to hit the 1 key on my keypad. So I'm looking at this from the front view. And we're going to hit Shift A and we're going to add in a cube. So a mesh cube. And I'm going to bring that up. I'm going to size this. And I'm going to rotate this on the y-axis by 45 degrees, RY45. Okay, so I've got that just like I want it. I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to size it a little bit bigger. I'm going to shrink it on the z-axis, the x-axis. Okay, so I've got my cube about where I want it. Now I'm going to press Control A, and I'm going to align the rotation and scale just to make life a little easier for me. And then I'm going to hit S and then X to size this along the x-axis. Kind of want to make that like a diamond shape. That looks okay right about there. I'm going to make this whole piece a little bit bigger, so it's about like so. I think that's perfect. Okay, so I've got that done. Now I'm going to use this as a cutout, and I'm going to cut this away from our ring shank. So with the cube selected, I'm going to hold the Shift key down, select our ring shank, and then press Control, Shift, and the minus on the keypad, or you can do a Boolean difference. So you come over here to do a Boolean difference right there. And that will cut out that piece on the shank. I'm going to go back into edit mode, and we are going to hit the 3 key on our keyboard, and I'm going to select the face here. And I'm also going to hold the Shift key down and select the other face. And now what I want to do is taper these two pieces in along the y-axis. For instance, SY to size along the y-axis, and you can see it's sizing that face along the y-axis. But of course, we don't want it to look like that. We want it to actually size or taper it somewhat down each side of the ring. So to do that, we're going to go into perspective mode. Or not perspective mode, proportional editing mode. And with that done, now if I hit S and then Y, you can see I have this circle of influence that I can make bigger or smaller with my mouse wheel. And then when I size that along the y-axis, you can see it tapers in the whole ring. So I'm just going to come in like that just to make it about like so. And that's the look I'm going for. I'm going to go back into object mode, take a look at our ring shank, and that's exactly what I want from our ring shank. Now that that's done, let's come over here. Let's change the name from Bezier Curve over to We're going to call this ring shank. Okay, so that's there. It's done. We can hide it. I'm going to press H on the keyboard so we can hide that particular model. Now we have to work on the little triangle bits. So I have to make these triangular bits, and we want to make sure that they go all the way around the frame that we're going to make for this. Now to make those little triangle bits, it's not that complicated. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a circle again. So we're going to use a curved circle to do this very easily. The first thing I want to do, though, is to get a gem or a diamond in place. We know those diamonds are approximately 1 millimeter, so I'm going to start with a 1 millimeter diamond, and there it is. And now I'm going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to bring in a curve and a circle. So there's the circle, and that looks pretty good. Now I'm just going to zoom in here with Shift B. We'll look at this from the top view. So we're looking at it straight down. You can get to the top view by pressing 7 on your numeric keyboard, or the tilde key above the tab key on your keyboard. Okay, so I've got that looking like that, and I need to make this somewhat of a triangle shape with a nice point at the top and somewhat of an arch at the bottom. It's very easy to do this. Don't let it get too complicated. What we're going to do is we're going to tab into edit mode with our circle selected. We're going to come over to this particular point here. I'm going to press S, and then I'm going to size. Oops, we've got proportional editing on, so make sure you turn that off. I'm going to hit S again, and we're going to size that down to a point. Just about like so. That gives us a nice tapered point. Now with these two selected, I'm going to hold the Shift key down and select both these lines on either side of our curve. And I'm going to hit S, and I'm going to size that in just about like so. And then we're going to take this bottom piece, we're going to bring it up, just like that. Now there's not enough space between the top of the diamond and the top of this point, so I'm actually going to drag that up because we want it to be approximately like that. We also want our lines to be somewhat straight. Now to get these straight lines, it's not very tricky, it's very easy. What we're going to do is come over here and select this point on our editable curve. Now I'm going to take this particular point on that line, and I'm going to move it in using the arrow, and I'm going to make it basically a straight line like so. I'm going to grab this one, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. So I'm going to select the upper point right here, and then I'm going to bring that in until that little dot touches the line of our curve. I'm going to go back into object mode, and now you can see our diamond fits into this little curve, and it looks very similar to the point at which we're trying to make these. It's not quite perfect, but we're going to get there. Okay, so there's our accent curve. And now what I want to do is actually make a copy of this because we want to use a couple of these curves to do several different things with our model. I'm going to select that. I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate that. And then I'll hit the right mouse button. It duplicates a copy of it. So now you can see I have accent curve 001. And this is going to be the point or the piece that we make our frame from. So let's grab this one. We're going to move this up just a little bit. And I'm going to take this particular piece. I'm going to look at this from the side view, and I'm going to bring that up a little bit. And now I want to add in some curve properties to this. So we're going to come back to our curve properties right here. Let's go over to our offset or extrusion rather, and let's increase our extrusion to about like that. That looks good, right about there. And now you can see it's pretty thin, but we need to give this some depth. So to do that, I'm going to add in a solidify modifier. Pretty simple to do. What we want to do now is just come over to our modifiers tab. This is the little wrench right here. We're going to hit the add modifier, come down to solidify. And that's going to solidify our model ever so slightly. So now what I want to do is add in some dimensions to this. I'm going to do it on the inside. So I'm going to increase this thickness number, and you'll see it increases it on the inside. Now, if we get this little error over here, we can actually go ahead and change that. And by doing that, we can bring it in on the outside, and that'll make it a little bit better. Okay, so that looks good. I'm okay with that. The next thing I want to do is look at this from the top, and I want to decrease the gaps along this particular piece. So what I want to do now is just basically size this down a little bit. So I'm going to move my mouse over here, press the S key, and just size it down just about like so. Okay, that looks pretty good so far. With that done, I can actually turn this into an object right now. I'm actually going to smooth this flat so we can see what it's going to look like. Looks pretty good. I'm liking the way that is. And if I look at this from the top down, we have our accent curve right here, and you can see it kind of blends along the entire piece. Actually, with that selected, I'm going to hit S and then Y, or X rather, and I'm going to make that just a little bit wider so that these dots are approximately in the middle of our frame. Now, in the model itself, there's a frame underneath the diamond. So to make that frame is very easy. To do that, I'm just going to add in another curve object, another curved circle. So I'm going to hit Shift A. I'm going to add in a curve and then a circle, and then I'm going to size this down so that it's just about the size of our diamond, about like that. Look at this from the side view. We can see I'll bring it down right about here. And now we need to give this some depth and extrusion. So we'll come over to the Properties tab, and we will increase the extrusion, make that about so big. And then I'm going to give this some depth over here, and I'm just going to make it a little deeper. And we'll lower the extrusion just to make it a little bit nicer looking. And I'm going to bring that up to about here so that our diamond is kind of sitting in that, and it's also sitting against the frame that we're going to be using for that triangle. Okay, that's done. Now I'm going to take this particular circle that we just added, I'm going to convert that to a mesh, just like so. And with that done, I'm also going to take this particular curve, and I'm going to convert that to a mesh also. There we go. Okay, so I have my frame holding the diamond. I have the frame that we're going to use for the triangle point. And the only thing we need to do is to add in the beads, because if you look at our picture, you can see this is mill grained. I could either use a mill grain tool on this, or I can just build in the beads in my CAD program. So using Blender, I'm actually going to add in the beads. To do that, we hit Shift A. We're going to add in a new mesh, and we're going to come down to UV sphere right here. Okay, so it puts this big sphere there. Of course, that sphere is 2 millimeters. We don't need it that big. We're going to drop it down to about this size, whatever makes you comfortable, but just keep in mind, you just want it to kind of overlap the frame of this triangle. Okay, so now that that's done, I'm going to actually hit Shift D because we're going to need another copy of this later, and I'm just going to move that out of the way. And it looks like my modeling is not random, so we can see the different colors. Okay, so now we can see the different colors for our models. So with this little green sphere selected, I'm going to hold Shift key down, and I'm going to select this triangle. This is our accent curve, and what I want to do now is use the Jewel Craft tool to duplicate or distribute on a curve. So with those both selected using the Shift key, I'm going to hit this Distribute with Curve, and you can see it puts 10 small beads there. Over in the lower left corner, if you haven't pressed any mouse buttons or keyboard buttons, you can press this little arrow here and it'll bring up the properties for this distribution on the curve. You can see I have about a 2/10 of a millimeter bead. We have 10 of them. So I want to increase these until I get to a point where I'm happy with the beads and how they kind of get to each other. So I'm going to get them to about here. And one more so that I have a point there. That looks pretty good, and the beads are distributed pretty well along that whole frame. So with that done, I'm going to just click off of that. And let's see, our accent curve, I'm going to select it over here, and I'm just going to move it back ever so slightly, just about like that. Look at this from the top-down view. You can see it doesn't look too bad. Maybe I want to size this. Let's just size X, see what happens. It's not too bad. I'm going to leave that like so. That looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. I could probably tweak it a little bit more, but I think so far so good. Okay, now that that's done, I can actually lower this a little bit so that it sits a little less proud of our frame, and that gives us some nice mill graining along the sides here. And so far so good. Maybe I'm going to move this up just ever so slightly, just like that. And that looks good just like that. And now what are we going to do with this other ball that's sitting here? What we're going to do with that is this. We're going to actually look at this from the side, and I'm going to bring it over to about here. I'm going to bring it down just in there. I'm going to move it over. I'm going to hit S, and I'm going to make it about this big. And the reason being is if we look at the original picture, you'll see that there are two balls of those little beads, and they're a little larger than our mill graining, stuck just north of the diamonds. So if we go back to Blender, and we take a look at that, and I come over to this view, you can see I've got that right there. And what I want to do is actually make this just a little bit larger. SZ along the Z-axis, I'm going to make it a little bit larger so that we can kind of use it as a prong. I'm going to actually grab it again. I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate that bead, Press enter, and I'm going to move this over to here, and I'm going to hit SZ to size it along the Z axis, and that looks pretty good. If I look at this from the top view, maybe I want to make this just a little bit smaller, just about like that. I'm going to bring that in, and that bead doesn't look too bad. I'm going to leave it just like so. Okay, so now what I need to do is add in a way so that we have two prongs over here holding in the diamond over on this point. Now that's pretty simple to do. I could just go and use the prong tool over here, which I would do, but I actually want to keep this as simple as possible. So I'm going to use the sphere that we created and hit Shift D to duplicate it one more time. Using the 7 key on my keypad, I'm going from top view, grab the G key, and then I can move it over to where I want it and just size it down. Grab it, size it down to a comfortable size, and then I'm going to hit G to kind of move it in between, just like so. And I want to make this a little taller, so SZ, and I'll just make it a little bit taller, bring that up a little bit, and we're going to use that as a prong. Okay, with that done, now I'm going to hit Shift D on that particular piece, G, and then X, and I'm going to move this over to here. So now I have two prongs on the bottom part, and then one big prong holding the stone over on this part. So that's how we're going to hold this 1mm diamond in place. Now I know what you're thinking, this is pretty small. These beads or mill graining that we're doing here may not print well on a 3D printer, but I'm going to show you some settings to do that, and then we'll 3D print this so that you can see the results. Okay, now that that's done, and I don't believe I have any more curves other than the accent curve, which we don't really particularly care about right now, we are going to blend or merge all these objects together using the union tool for the Boolean. And what we could do is just grab each one of these, and I'm just going to grab a couple at a time, and then I'll grab the frame and then Boolean union them. Okay, so I've got everything union together, and if we go and select all, you can see our model. Oops, I forgot these two here. Let's go and add those. And we'll union those, and now we select this, we go into edit mode, select all. You can see our model is all one piece. Let's call this triangle. Now let's get this particular piece, these two pieces hidden. So I'm going to take this particular one with the diamond and the frame, and I'm press H, and we're going to hide that. Now, like I said, we have a 6mm, it looks like to be a 6mm sapphire. Let me get that back up on the screen. So I'm guessing this is a 5.5 or a 6mm sapphire. So why don't we try 5.5? Going to move this off to the side. Let's go to Gem or Jewel Craft, and we're going to go into this section to add in a stone. Let's do 5.5. And just because we can select sapphire, and I'll press OK. It's going to put a blue stone right in the middle of our screen, and that's what we want. So from here, we also have to come up with the parameter of our frame underneath this sapphire, which is very similar to what we did to the diamond. So I'm going to come over and I'm going to hit Shift A. I'm going to come and add a circle, a curved circle. I'm going to size that up so that it is just slightly smaller than our gemstone. I'm going to bring it down. And now what we're doing is we're making the head or the frame that the sapphire is going to sit into. So with that done, now we're going to come over to our curve properties. I'm going to change the resolution over to 24, and I'm also going to increase the extrusion to be about like so. And if we look at that from the side, then I can go and add some depth, and let's make that a little bit smaller. So we want it to be about like that. SZ, I'm going to make that a little shorter on the Z axis. Look at this from the side. That looks good because it's going to step into our stone the right way. Okay, I'm kind of liking the way that is, and I'm going to convert that over to a mesh. Okay, with that done, so with that selected, I'm going to actually bring that up just so we can see it above the sapphire. That looks pretty good. It's a little bit on the small side, so maybe that sapphire should be a little smaller. Yeah, I think it should be. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there. Let's take this, and let's make that just a little bit smaller. Actually, I can make this a little bit bigger. The nice thing about doing this in CAD is that you can do whatever you want. Okay, so I've sized my sapphire, looks like 4.5 millimeters. Why don't we just size this, these two frames up to 5 millimeters? Right about like that. And let's make this triangle just a little bit bigger because it really doesn't matter. We can put any size stone we want in there. And let's say I want it to be about yay big. And if we look at our image, we're not too far off. It looks about the same here. Let's go back to our model. And now what we want to do is put a circle of all of these triangles all the way around. So how do we do that? Pretty simple with Jewelcraft. It's kind of a nice add-on. And now what I want to do is kind of get this piece to be all the way around this ring. We're going to do that by hitting Shift A. We're going to add in a curved circle. I'm going to size that curved circle to be about here. That looks to be about right. It may not be perfect, but we're going to get there. Let's just take a look at that picture again on that Titanic ring and just see. Looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 16 sections all the way around that, if I'm not mistaken. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So we have 14 of these little triangles. And those 14 triangles, we're just going to basically use this to create those 14 triangles. So with this selected, if I come over and hold my triangle down, hold the Shift key down and then select the curve, let's go to Distribute on Curve. Let's drop this down to 14. And it looks to be just about perfect on that, except one thing. We want these little we want the triangles to kind of tilt up, so we can come over here to tilt, and I can tilt them up or down, and I want them to be about like so. That looks good. Now they're still a little too close to our sapphire. So now that I've got about the angle that I want, I am actually going to just lower this down just a bit, and then I'm going to hit S, and I'm going to size this up so I can make it just a little bit larger. About like that. And what I want to do is use the tips of each of these triangles to use as prongs to hold in the sapphire. And it looks like we're about accomplishing that. So far, so good. Okay, so now what I need to do is come up with a way to add this frame to the underside of our triangles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to size it up a little bit. And then I'm going to bring this up to here so that it's touching those triangles. And that should be good, right as it is. And now what I'm going to do is select each of these triangles one at a time, holding the Shift key down. And we're going to select this frame. It's going to keep going until I have all 14 of them selected, plus the frame, and then I'll do a Boolean union. That's going to join all 14 pieces to that round head. Okay, so there it is. It's changed the color because I've got random turned on. So every time modeling changes happen, it changes the color of the model. So don't worry about that if you're wondering why. Okay, so now that that's done, next thing we have to do is actually create the frame for the outside rim of this particular model. Now, we've got these two pieces sitting here. So let's kind of move them up and out. We don't need this circle anymore, so let's get rid of that. And if you get these weird things happening with your stones and everything kind of misshaped, don't worry, because we can always put this back in the center by doing set origin to center of mass. Hit Shift S, move to cursor. Going to move that down just like so. Select Shift. We've got both of those, and now I'm going to move that up and out. Okay, so Jewelcraft does leave these little trailers on here, so always be aware of that. Let's unhide our ring shank. There we go. So there's our ring shank. So what I want to do now is figure out how we're going to have this ring shank tie into this particular ring, so that if we look at this from the front view, we can see that this would be poking into our finger. So we need this actually to sit up about yay high. This ring shank's probably going to have to be a little bit bigger because we only have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 14 millimeters. So I'm going to size this ring shank up a little bit. S, so it's about here. Okay, and so far so good, but I'm going to bring the sapphire and the head up just ever so slightly. And now what we're going to do is add in a frame for the bottom portion and the top portion. And again, I'm going to bring that up just about like so. I'm going to hit Shift A, and we're going to add in another curve circle. I'm going to size this up. You can see there's our curve. I'm going to actually bring that up to about here. Looks good. And I'm not done yet, guys. This is a little trick that I learned a while ago, and this is what makes working with curves so nice. Let's come over to our curve properties. Let's increase the extrusion so that we get some depth to that. And we don't want a lot. We just want a little bit because we're going to add in some depth on here. And I'm going to look at this from the front view. And what you're seeing is this flat spot here. We want to make that a little bit arched to match the curvature of the inside portion of our ring. To do that, I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm going to select this particular point on one side over here. I'm going to hold the shift key down and select this one right there. Go back to the front view, and now I can bring that up and kind of arch this piece just like so. That gives us a nice arch on the bottom portion of our frame. And then if I need to, I can just size that a little bit. Hit all. Size, and then I'm designed into the ring shank. That's perfect. That's about what I want. Okay, so I'm really not happy with the height of this. I want to bring this up just about like so that the point of our sapphire is not protruding through this arch here. Okay, so good. So far so good. I've got that done the way I like it. And now what we need to do is make this frame that goes along here so that we can attach that to the bottom portion of our frame, which is pretty easy. So now I'm going to take in another curve. So I'm going to hit Shift A. We're going to add in another circle curve, and I'm going to bring this one up, size this out to about the diameter of our head, just a little bit lower than that. I'm going to bring that up to about here. Let's go to the curve properties for this new curve, and let's add some depth to it. And I want to give that about depth like that. I'm going to bring it down because I don't want it protruding into our frame. And I'm going to size this down to about like this. If we look at this from the top, that gives me some floating diamonds on the outside perimeter, but yet it can be attached to the underside of our, Control Z. Let's grab that. We can bring that up right to about like that. Okay. That looks to be about what I wanted to try to accomplish. Actually, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. We're going to go and actually add this to the perimeter. So with that curve selected, let's make the depth a little bit smaller. Let's go into side view. I'm going to size this so that it comes to the outside of our triangles. Going to merge this down a little bit, make it a little bit smaller. And I like that a little bit better. Okay, that looks good for me. I like that a whole lot better. So far, so good. Making sense? We're almost done. Now, I'm going to take these two curves, this one here and this one here, and we're going to convert those to meshes. So come over to Convert to Mesh. Do the same for the other one, Convert to Mesh. So now those two are meshes. What we want to do now is tie these two together, but we have to come up with a gallery on the bottom side of our ring. So to do that, I'm going to hold this down, hold the Shift key down, select our shank, and we're going to merge those with the Union tool. And now what I'm going to do is actually create some kind of a way so we have a gallery. Each of these gallery points may be pointing to the in-between section between these triangles, holding up the frame from the ring shank frame, and you're going to see what I mean in a second. So to do that, I'm going to hit Shift A. I'm going to add a cylinder, and let's increase the vertices to 50 just to make it look a little more round. I'm going to hit SZ, and size that up, and this is going to be what I'm going to use for the support for our gallery. So let's take a look at this. Let's size it down just about like that because we don't need that big. Let's add in a new curve. Shift A, curve, circle, and now what I want to do with this is size this up to, again, about the size of our curves that we just made and adjusted to meshes. So we want that about in between these two. So I'm going to size that up so that it's about here, just like that. And you can see the yellow line is in between both of the upper and lower frames of our gallery. Okay, so there's a reason I'm doing that, and I'll show you in a second. Let's grab this cylinder. Let's bring that up here. Okay, let's size that down just a little bit. Size it along the z-axis to make it a little longer. We can go modify that in just a little bit. So we know we want 14 of these little posts, and we want them to, of course, be at an angle. So to do this, I'm going to take this curve now. I'm going to bring it down. Using the 1 key, I'm going to bring it down to right here, so it's about in the middle. And I'm going to take that. I'm going to actually bring that. Doesn't matter where I put it. I'm going to hold the Shift key down with the cylinder selected. I'm going to grab our new curve, and I am going to distribute using Jumpcraft. Or Jewelcraft. I'm going to distribute onto the curve, and let's reset this to 0. Let's set that to 0. And let's size these down because we don't want them that big. Okay, so right now, if we look at this from the side view, you can see they're going straight down at an angle. We want to tilt those. So how do we tilt them? This is how we tilt them. Use the tilt key. And you can see it kind of gives us a nice flow into our model. Now it may not be long enough, so we're just gonna keep angling these just ever so slightly until we get a nice angle like so. And then now I can hit SZ and kind of resize those ever so slightly. And if I want to or need to, I can bring them down just ever so slightly, which I don't need to do. That looks pretty good. I'm going to just size them down, or size them over just a little bit. Okay, so far so good. You see some of them are contacting, some of them aren't. So how do we fix that particular problem? Very easily. We're going to select this particular piece, and we're going to come over to Global. We're going to select Normal. And then here you can see the X, Y, and Z axis arrows on that particular piece. And now I'm going to hit the Shift key, and I'm going to select the other side. And I'm going to hit SZ, and it's going to size those particular two about like so. And they are protruding into our frame a little bit, but that's okay. We're going to leave them like that. And now I'm going to come over to the opposite side of the ring. I'm going to select this particular prong or this particular cylinder that we had. Hold the Shift key down and select the other one. And again, we're on the normals axis. I'll hit SZ, and we'll size those so that they make contact. And now all of our supports for our gallery are holding up the frame of our ring. Just to make sure that we get these all merged together, I'm going to hit Shift key, and I'm going to start selecting each one of these little cylinders, grab the ring, and then do a Boolean union. And I'm going to keep going around until the entire model, except for the gemstone, and if I hit tab, we go into edit mode. If I select all, you can see everything is merged together. We have no stranded bits floating around. So far, so good. Okay, so our ring looks pretty good. The only thing I think I should do is kind of maybe make a little change here. I'm going to actually shade this flat so we can see the sharp angles. I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to select this edge right here. So you notice we can select edges with the edge tool turned on. And I'm going to bring that up so that it's contacting that part of the frame. And I'm going to bring this one up just a little bit also. So now I have some contact within this model. It's not a lot, but I could bring this one up a little bit more and give it a little more contact. And if we want this to taper, I can actually just bring this one up like so. That gives me a good look. And now let's do the same on the opposite side. Okay, so there's our rendered image. It looks pretty good. And I think what I'm going to do is kind of send this off to a picture of this off to my customer and see if she likes it. If she does, maybe we can cast it for her. I'm actually going to go and 3D print this, and then I'll show you the results of the 3D print after I'm done. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to my channel. And if you have any comments, please leave them in the comments section below. Your participation in my channel really helps me out. I love the comments you guys leave, even the negative ones, because they do help me to modify my channel and grow as I need to. Thanks for watching, guys, and thanks for the support.